Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. Today is the 24th day of February 2024. I'm going to be reading again from Gerald Massey's work here called Ancient Egypt in the Light of the World, Part 2. Appreciate you being here. Um, Again, this is Gerald Massey, who was what do I call it? Basically, he was researching, he's done a lot of researching what I would call the occult. This is one of his works. And basically, he's also a Egyptologist in the past. And most people don't know who this guy is, and rightly so, because most people are unaware of his writings, because mainly his writings were written back in the late 1800s and early, well, actually yeah, late 1800s and part of what we call early 1900s. And then he passed away, roughly, probably, I think, in 1908, something of that nature, as well as I can recollect. So, thank you again for being here. So, I'm going to read a little bit here tonight. It's interesting that he gives the illustrations here what the Egyptians done based upon the animals. Everything around them had a representation of something that was speaking to us, not us, but back in the past. And that was how they communicated back then. And unfortunately, we don't know that. We don't understand that. And that's most of what is called hieroglyphics. So anyway, let's get into the part here. Our forebears and forerunners were not so far beside themselves as to believe that if they had a soul at all, it was outside of their own bodies, hidden somewhere in a tree, in a bird, in an egg, in a hare, in a duck, a crocodile, or any other zootype that never was supposed to be the dwelling of the human soul. In the Basque story of Marbrook, the monster is slain by being struck on the forehead with an egg that was found in a pigeon, that was found in a fox, that was found in a terrible wolf in a forest, based upon Webster's page 83. However, represented it was the sun, S-U-N, that caused the monster's death. So in the Norse tales, the troll, Trod, T-R-O-L-L, the troll, or Ori, bursts at sight of dawn because his death was in the solar orb that is represented by the Kemite egg of the goose. The giant of darkness is inseparable from the young hero or the solar god, who rises from Aminta and his valiant conqueror. These being the two irreconcilable enemies, as they are in the ritual. It follows that the princess who finally succeeds in attaining the giant's secret concerning the hiding place of his heart in the egg of a bird is the lunar lady and Amento, who, as Hathor, was the princess by name when she had become the daughter of Ra. She outwits the Apap, who is her swallower at the time of the eclipse, and conveys the secret knowledge to the youthful solar hero, who overcomes the giant by crushing his heart in the egg. In fighting with the monster, the Basque hero is endowed with the faculty of transforming into a hawk. The hawk says to him, quote, "When you wish to make yourself a hawk, you will say, 'Jesus hawk,' end quote, and you will be a hawk," end quote. The hawk of Jesus takes the place of the Horus hawk, just as the name of Marlborough is the substituted for that of the hero who is elsewhere in Petit Yorie, that is Little Horus. That's based upon Webster's, again, Legends, page 80 through 83. Horus, like the hero of these tales, is human on Earth, and he transforms into the hawk when he goes to fight the Apak monster in Aminto. In the Basket version, the hero, human hero transforms into a hawk. Or as it said, the young man, quote, the young man made himself a hawk, end quote. Just as the human Horus changed into the golden hawk and then flew away with the princess clinging firmly to his neck. And here the soul that was in the egg is identified as the hawk itself. At least it is when the egg is broken with the blow struck by the princess on the giant's forehead that the hero makes his transformation into the hawk. In the mythology, it was the bird of earth that laid the egg. But in eschatology, when the egg is hatched, it is the bird of heaven that rises from it as the golden hawk. The hawk of the sun is especially the Egyptian bird of soul, although the dove or pigeon also was a type of the soul that was derived from Hathor. In the Martian, the duck takes the place of the goose, but these are co-types in the mythos. In the Egyptian, Horus pierces the Apop dragon in the eye and pins his head to the earth with a lance. The mythical mode of representation went on developing in Egypt, keeping touch with the advancing arts. The weapon of the basket hero was earlier than the lance or spear of Horus. It is a stake of wood made red hot. With this, he pierces the huge monster in the eye and burns him blind. The Greek version of this is too well known to call for repetition here, and the basket lies near to the original Egyptian. It is more important to identify the eye and the blazing snake. Horus, the young solar god, is slayer of the Apop by piercing him in the eye. The Apop is the giant, the dragon, the serpent of darkness, and the eye of Apop was thought of as the eye of a serpent that was huge enough to coil around the mountain of the world, or about the tree of life and light, which had its rootage in the nether earth. This on the horizon was the tree of dawn. The stake is a reduced form of the tree that was figured in the green of dawn. The typical tree was a weapon of the ancient Horus, who is described as fighting Sut with a branch of palm, which also is the reduced form of the tree. The tree of dawn upon the horizon was the weapon of the solar god with which he pierced the dragon of darkness and freed the mountain of earth and the princess in Aminto from its throttling, crushing, and reptilian coils. This tree, conventionally in the stake, makes red hot in the furnace. Form the primitive weapons which Horus or Ulysses or the Tartaro put out the monster's eye and pierce the serpent's head to let forth the waters of light once more and to free the lady from her prison in the lower world. You see, this is all representing spiritual, metaphor here. When the Apop monster in the cave of darkness was personified in something like the human shape, the giant as reptile in the earliest representation passed into the giant as a monster in the form of a magnified man called the Cyclops and named Polyphonius. In one of the African folk tales, the little hero, that is called Kolulu, slays the monster by thrusting a huge red hot boulder down the devourer's throat. This is a type of the red hot solar orb which the power of darkness tried to swallow and then put out the light. The lunar lady, as well as the solar hero, is the dragon slayer in the basket legends. And one of these, the Lothi reptile, lies sleeping with his head in the lap of the beautiful lady. The hero descends to her assistance in the underworld. She tells him to, quote, be off, end quote. That is, quote, the monster, end quote, has only 3/4 of an hour to sleep, she says, quote, and if he wakes it, it is all over with you and me, end quote. It is the lunar lady who worms the great secret out of the monsters concerning his death when he confesses where his heart lies hidden. Quote, at last, end quote, he tells her, quote, you must kill a terrible wolf which is in the forest, and inside of him is a fox, and in the fox is a pigeon. This pigeon has an egg in its head, and whoever should strike me on the forehead with the egg would kill me, end quote. The hero, having become a hog, secures the egg and brings it to the, quote, young lady, end quote. And having done his part, hands over the egg and says to her, quote, at present it is your turn, act alone, end quote. Thus, it appears that the egg made use of by the prince to kill the giant in the sun, and that made use of by the princess was the lunar orb. Here we have the egg, that is the, quote, the egg of the sun and the moon, end quote, which Thoth is said to have moved in the beginning. Quote, she strikes the monster as he had told her, and he falls stark dead, end quote. This is from Webster's Malbrook, end quote. The dragon was known in Britain as the typical cause of drought and devourer of 9 maidens who had gone in to fetch water from the spring before he was slain by Martin. These are the representatives of 9 new moons renewed at the source of light in the netherworld. Dr. Plott, in his History of Cambridgeshire, page 349, mentions the custom at Burford of making a dragon annually and, quote, carrying it up and down the town in great Joliet on Midsummer Eve, end quote, to which he says, not knowing for what reason, quote, they added a giant, end quote. That is the Midsummer Eve. Both the dragon and giant signify the same monster that swallowed the water and devoured the givers of light, that is lunar or solar, the dragon being a zoomorphic type and the giant usually anthropomorphic. Instead of saying 9 moons passed into the dark as a mode of reckoning the months, it might be said and was said that 9 maidens were devoured by the dragons of darkness. The myth originated when darkness was the devouring giant and the weapons of the warrior was a stone that imaged the solar orb. In the contest of the young and ruddy hero David with the giant, that is Goliath, the Hebrew version of the folktale, still retains the primitive features of the stone. We know the universal mother as the evil reptile of the dark, forever warring with the light. That also drinks the water which is the life of vegetation, as the fiery dragons of drought. But there is a very primitive version, as that among the Australian Aborigines, the Andaman Islanders and the Red Men, in which a gigantic frog drinks up all the water in the world. Here, the frog plays the part of a pot monster that swallows the waters at sundown and is pierced and cut in pieces, that is coil by coil, to set them flowing freely as the return of day, either by the hawk, a Ra, or the cat, or by Horus, the anthropomorphic hero. In the Andaman, that is the Islanders, version of the conflict between the bird of light and the devil of darkness, the waters are drunk up and withheld by a big toad. And a Arrakis or Huron form of this mythical representation also shows the devouring monster as a gigantic frog that drank up all the water of the world. The Aborigines of Lake Tyers, Tyers, likewise relates that once in a time there was no water anywhere on the surface of the whole earth. This had all been drunk up and was concealed, and is in the body of a monstrous frog. The dragons of the water is also descendant of the holy well in Britain. And here, again, the evil powers of drought and darkness is represented by the devil in the form of a frog as presiding spirit of the water. In the well, on the Devil's Causeway between Araceli and Acton, there is supposed to be a huge frog which represents the devil. That is the the hostile power of drought. The proper time for the malevolent frog to be seen would be when the well was dried up in times of great drought. Hence he is but seldom seen in a rainy climate like ours. That's from Burn, Shropshire, Forelord, page 428. The frog still suffers even in this, quote, enlightened land, end quote, of ours for supplying a zootype of the evil powers. It is yet a provincial sport for country loans to, quote, hike the toad, end quote. That is by jerking it high in the air from the end of a plank as a mode of appealing to heaven for rain and the kind of weather wanted. Even so, poor Froggy has to walk the plank and suffer in the presence for having been a representative in the past of the monster that drank up all the water. The Orinoco Indians used to keep toads in vessels, not to worship them, but to have them at hand as representatives of the power that drank up the water or kept back the rain. And in time of drought, the toads were beaten to procure the much desired rain. In various countries, the monster of the dark was represented by an animal entirely black. This in Egypt was the black boar of Sut. And what these customs signified, according to the wisdom of Egypt, they meant elsewhere, where the Timurius are direfully suffering from lack of rain. They offer up a black pig as a sacrifice. The black pig was slain just as Apap was pierced because it imagined the dark power that once withheld the waters of day and now denies the rain or the water of life. In Sumatra, it is the black cat that typifies the mythical power which withholds the rain. Women go naked or nearly so to the river and wade in it as a primitive mode of sacrifice or solicitation. Then a black cat is thrown into the water and forced to swim for its life, like the witch in the European customs. The black goat, the black pig, and the black cat are all typhoramian types of the same symbolic value as the black boar of Sut or the Apap dragon. In each case, the representatives of the dark and evil powers were slain or thrown into the water as a propitiation to the beneficial power that gave the rain. Slaying the type of drought was a means of fighting against the powers of evil and making an appeal to the good spirit. It was a primitive mode of casting out Satan, that is, the adversary, in practically sign language. The giant or Ori mythology was a result of humanizing the animal types. At first, the Apap reptile rose up vast, gigantic as the swallowing darkness or devouring dragon. This, when humanized, became the giant. The magnified non-natural Ori of a man that takes the monster place in latter legendary lore. The Apap dragon coiled about the mount was the keeper of the treasures in the netherworld. So it is with the giant in Jack the Giant Killer. It is said the Mount of Cornwall was kept by a huge giant named Curlman. End quote. Jack, our little solar hero, asks what reward would be given to the man who killed Cormoran. Quote, the giant treasure, end quote, they told him, would be the reward. Quote, Jack, that is, quote, then let me undertake it, end quote. After he had slain the giant, Jack went to search the cave, which answers to the Amento in the lower earth, in which the treasure was concealed. This was the treasure of light and water that had been hidden by the giant in his lair. The Aryan fairy tales and folk tales can be unriddled in the Kamite mythos, which was based on the phenomenon of external nature. It is the moon, for instance, who was a woman one half the time and a frog or a serpent during the other half. In the first character, she was Sati, the Lady of Light. In the second half of the lunation, she was the frog that swam the waters of the nether earth, and made her transformation as Heka in Amento. Some writers have denounced the savage brutality and obscenity of these whom they look upon in the makers of mythology. But in all this, they have been spitting beside the mark. Moreover, the most repulsive of aspects do not belong to the mythology proper, but are mainly owing to the decacies and the degradation of the matter in the margin. Also to the change which the mythos suffered in passing from zoomorphic mode representation. There's neither morality nor immorality, so long as the phenomena are not human and the drama is performed by the primitive actors. But when the characters are humanized or demonized in human forms, the recast may be fatal to the mythical meaning. Primitive simplicity is apparently converted into senseless absurdity, and the drama of the nature powers turned into a masquerade of monsters. Plutarch will furnish us with illustrations with these ideology might have selected. For example, when speaking of the elder Horus, who came, quote, came into the world before his time, end quote, as the phantom forerunner of the true light, he says that Osiris had accompanied him with Isis, that is his spouse, after her decease, which looks very ominous for the morals of the, quote, myth makers, end quote, who could ascribe with immorality to their gods. It is not a fair deduction from a datum like that to infer that the Egyptians were accustomed to cohabit with the corpse of their dead women. Obviously, that is one of the possible implications, especially as Osiris, according to Spencer, was once a man. But now for an explanation of the plain ground or natural fact. Isis, in one character, was the mother moon, the reproducer of the light and Amento, the place of conjunction and of re-begetting to the sun god. When Osiris entered the moon, and she became the one woman who was clothed with the sun. As the end of lunation, the old moon died and became a corpse, and is time portrayed as a mummy in the underworld, and was revivified by Osiris. The solar fecundator of the moon was the mother that brought forth the child of light, the, quote, cripple deity, end quote. That was naturally enough begotten in the dark, that is, Pluto, that is, but worse still, when Osiris laid helpless and breathless in Amento with a corpse-like face, end quote. This is based upon from ritual, that is in chapter 74. His two wives, who are likewise his daughters, come to cohabit with him and raise him from the dead, or re-erect him like as the eye or like Tot. It is said of Isis, she raised the remains of God of the resting heart and extracted his seed to beget a heir, end quote, or to make him human by reincarnation in the flesh. That is from the hymn to Osiris and Records. That is line 16, page 102, volume 4, first series, also volume 4, page 21, second series. In this phase, it is the female who cohabitates with the corpse of the dead man, or dead male, I should say. But in neither were the actors of the drama human, although they are humanized in the margin. The mythos is repeated and applied in Semitic folk tales. That is, when Lot, if you remember this, two daughters are with, quote, with child by their father, end quote. This is based upon Genesis chapter 19, verses 36. The difference being that Osiris, as father in the mysteries of Amento, was dead at the time, whereas in the irresponsible Martian, Lot is represented as dead drunk. The myths are not to be explained by means of the Martian, not if you collect and compare the nursery tales of all the world, but we can explain that the Martian more or less by aid of the myths, or rather the mythical representation in which we can once more recover the lost key. The Aryan folk tales, for example, are by no means a faithful reflection of the world as it appeared to the primitive mind. They are not a direct reflection of anything. They are refract mythology and representation in mythology. It is not direct, not literal, but mystical. Egyptian mythology and all it signifies lies between the Aryan or other folk tales and primitive man. The Martian are not the oldest or most primitive form of the myth. They are the latest. The coinage is the same, but the primitive impress is greatly worn down, and the features are often well-nigh effaced. In the Martian, the ancient wise woman or old mother goes on telling her tales, but the memory of their meaning has lapsed by reason of her age. Whereas in the ritual, the representation is still preserved and repeated accurately according to knowledge. The mythos passes into the folk tale, not the folk tale into the mythos. In Egyptian Sign Language, the earliest language of mythology, the sun was represented in the fullness of his power by the line. When it went down to the underworld by night, as in the wintertime, it was imagined as the disappearing mouse. Ra was the line, Horus was the mouse. The blind shrew mouse being a type of Horus, darkened in Amento. Ra, as the solar line, lost his power in the underworld and was as the animal in the hunter's toils. Then Horus, the little hero, as the shrewd mouse came to deliver the entangled line under the type of the mongoose or Inchinimon. The little hero attacked the serpent of darkness as the mouse, and as the mouse, it was the deliverer of the line in the mythos. But when aware the wisdom was no longer taught in the mysteries, the Gnostics naturally lapsed. The myth became a folk tale or a legend of the nursery and pressed into the fable of the mouse that nibbled the cord in two, which bound the captured line and set the mighty beast at liberty. Thus the mythos passes into the Martian, and the mysteries still clung on for very life in the moralities. The ass in the male form is a type of Tum, Tum, the sun god and Amento, a vignette to the ritual show the ass being devoured by the serpent of darkness called the eater of the ass in chapter 40. The ass then in the Egyptian mythos represents the sun god Tum. Greek Thomos, passing through the netherworld by night. It is Tum in his character of On or Iu, who is also represented on the tomb of Ramses VI as a god with the ears of an ass, hauling at the rope by which the sun is drawn up from Amento, the lower Egypt of the mythos. Atum, or Tum, is the old man of that setting sun, and Anu in his son. That's S-O-N. Thus, the three characters of the old man, that is his son, S-O-N, and the ass can be identified with Atum, Anu, or Osiris and Horus, and the nocturnal sun or the sun of winter with the slow motion which constitutes the difficulty of getting the ass forward in the fable. This difficulty of getting the ass along, whether ridden by Tom, the father, or pulled along by his son, was illustrated in a popular pastime. When on the 8th day of the festival of the Corpus Dominia, the people of Empolia suspended the ass aloft in the air and made it fly perforce in presence of the mocking multitude. Gubernatius says the Germans of Westphalia, quote, made the ass a symbol of the dull St. Thomas and were accustomed to call it by the name of the ass, quote, the ass Thomas, end quote. The laggard boy who came the last to school upon St. Thomas Day, end quote. This is from Zoology Mythology, Volume 1, page 362. But we find an earlier claimant than this for the, quote, ass Thomas, end quote, and Tum, or Thamos, the Camite solar god who made the passes of Amento very slowly with the ass, or as it was represented, riding on the ass, and therefore for the Greek fable of the old man and his ass. The birth of a folk tale may be seen in the legend of the, quote, Sleeping Beauty, end quote, when it was known that the renewing moon derived her glory from the procreative sun. Their meaning in the underworld became a fertile source of legends that were mothered by the myth. The moon goddess is the lovely lady sleeping in Amento, waiting for her deliverer, the young solar god, to come and wake her with the lover's kiss. She was, Hathor, called the princess in her lunar character, and he was the all-conquering Horus. It was a legend in the resurrection, which at first was so lunar in the mythos. Afterwards, a symbolic representation of the soul that was awakened from the sleep of death by Horus in the role of savior or deliverer of the Mons in Amento. So the mythos faded into the fairy tale. It is a cardinal tenet of the present work that the Aryan Marchen, that is, and European folklore were derived from Egyptian mythology. This might be illustrated without end. For example, there is a classic tradition of folk tale repeated by Pliny, Pliny. This is in history. Looks like, I don't know what that means, NAT, 7,3, which tells of a time when a mother in Egypt bore 7 children at one birth. Of course, this legend has no origin in natural history. Such a birth belongs to mythology, in which the mother of 7 children at a birth was primarily the bringer force of 7 elementary powers, who can be traced as such in all their 7 characters. The one great mother with her 7 sons constitute a primary Ogdod. She survived in a Gnostic form as Akamolmot Athos, mother of the 7 rulers of the Heptamus, quote, the mother, end quote, says Irenaeus. And says chapter, volume 5, 2, 3. I don't know, I guess it's page 2 and 3. Quote, they called Ardonius Sophia, earth, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is identified by Jeremiah with the ancient mother who was the bringer forth of 7 sons as the mother, quote, as the mother of the young men, end quote. Another quote, she that hath bored 7, end quote. Who now giveth up the ghosts. That is in chapter 15, page 8. This mother of 7 also appears as the great harlot in the book of Revelation, who is the mother of the 7 kings, which were at the same time 7 heads of the solar dragon, and also 7 consorts who were born children of the old great mother. There were, quote, the 7 children of the thigh, end quote, in the astronomical mythology. Thus, the ancient genitress was the mother who brought forth 7 children at a birth, or as a companionship according to the category of phenomenon. Her 7 children were the natural or nature powers of all mythology. They are represented under diverse types because the powers were reborn in different phenomena. We shall find them grouped as 7 serpents, or 7 apes, or 7 jackals, or 7 crocodiles, or even hippopotamus, or hawks, or bulls, or rams, who became 7 children of the mother when the myth is rendered anthropomorphically in the latter forms of the Marchen, among which there is a Bengali folktale of a boy who was sucked by 7 mothers. This is La Baharia Day, that is folk tales of Bengal. And this boy of Martian can be identified with child Horus in the astronomical mythos as, quote, the bull of the 7 cows, end quote. The 7 cows were grouped in the great bear as a sevenfold figure of motherhood. The cows were also called the 7 Hathors, who presided over the birth of the child as 7 fates in the Egyptian theology. And in later legends, there are the 7 mothers of one child. When he became a child, they were the 7 women who ministered to him of their substance in a very literal manner. The 7 givers of liquid life to the nursing were portrayed as women in Amento. The 7 Hathors who were present as fates at childbirth, as cows in the constellation of the Great Bear. The sucklers might be imagined as 7 women, even 7 cows, or even 7 sows. Thus, the Romans had evidently heard of them as a sevenfold form, or reret, the sow, a co-type with the cow. The Bengali folktale shows the Egyptian mythos reduced to the stage of the Aryan Martian. The typical 7 mothers of the child also survive among the oldest curiosities of Christianity. It is said in the Gospel of the Nativity, that is, in chapter 8, that Mary, that is the Virgin of the Lord, end quote, has been brought up with 7 other virgins in the temple. Also, there are 7 women in the Gospels who minister to Jesus of their substance. Again, we are able to affiliate the folktale with the original mythos, after which it is of little importance to our inquiry which country the Aryan Martians came from last. The 7 Hathors, or cows in the mythos, are also the 7 fates in attendance at the birth of a child, and the Babur arpeggio. 7 women, each of them carrying a sword, are present when a child is born, who mix the placenta with ashes and put it into a small basket, which they hung up in a particular kind of tree. These likewise are a form of the 7 Hathors who were present at childbirth as the 7 fates in the mythos. In such ways, the Kamite mythos passed into the Aryan Martian. The child who had no father had been mythically represented as the fertilizer of the mother when in utero. Like Plot, the god in embryo. Hence he was called the bull of his mother. But why the bull? Because this was not the human child. It was Horus as the calf, born of the cow, in a pre-human type when the father who was not yet individualized. The solar god at sunset made his entrance into the breeding place of the netherworld, I should say, and is said to prepare his own generation for rebirth next day, but not in human guise. The bull of his mother is shown upon the horizon as Horus the calf. But when the persons and transactions are presented anthropomorphically in accordance with the human terminology, the calf, which had no father but was the only bull, becomes the child who was born without a father. Thus the mythos passes into Martian or legendary lore, and the child who repudiates his own mother takes a final form as the boy lover of Venus, Ishtar, or Hathor, the divine mother, and is subject culminated in literature as for, quote, example, in Shakespeare's poem, Venus and Adonis, end quote, which is root mythology fleshed in a human form. Again and again, the Egyptian mythos furnishes a prototype that will suffice to account for 100 folk tales. For another instance, take the legend of the child that was predestined to be a king in spite of the monster pursuing the mother, or lying in wait to devour and destroy the infant from before its birth. Haror, Haror, or Horus the Elder, was that child in the mythos. The title of Repa will identify the child born to the king, as that signifies the heir apparent, or the prince who was predestined to become the king. An instructive example of the way in which the mythos that we look on as Egyptian was dispersed and spread in folk tales over the world may be seen in the legend of the combat betwixt a father and son. The story has attained to somewhat, or as I, or in a epithet dignity in Matthew Arnold's poem of So Sarap and Rustum. End quote. It is also found in many parts of the world, including New Zealand. Briefly, on briefly, I should say, summarize the story and legendary lore is that the son who does not know his own father. In the Meroic tale of Kokeko, quote, the boy is called a bastard. Also, the tale of Pico, the child is a bastard also. This is a phrase in Latin language to describe the boy whose birth was matriarchally when the father was unknown individually. But such a legend as this, when found in folklore, does not come straight out of local sociology or ethnologically in any country. We have to reckon with the rendering of the natural fact in the astronomical mythology of Egypt. In the older day of indefinite paternity, when the father was personally unknown, it was likewise unknown that the child of light, born and reborn in the moon, was the son of the solar god. This was a mythical son, that is S-O-N, who could not know his own father. The earliest son in sociology or mythology did not know his own father. The elder Horus was the mother of mother's child, who was born but not begotten. Now a child whose father is unknown is a bastard. And I'm going to stop here. It's roughly been about 45 minutes almost. And we'll take up this next part of this story, not story, but showing the book here from Mr. Massey. And so thank you for being here and listening. Again, this is revealing, his works called Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World. So you can see what he's sharing here has been, the stories have been retold many, many, many times across the world in folklores and folk tales, so to speak. So thank you for your attention, and I wish you a good night. You take care, and we'll talk to you soon.